This morning I woke up to the news that a 15-year-old YouTuber had committed suicide after his channel got demonetized. He was living in a situation where he was being abused by his family as well, and this was probably just the straw that broke the camel's back. I also woke up to the news that my reaction to the Crunchyroll Awards had been blocked worldwide. And then of course I hopped on Twitter to witness about 70,000 children calling me a boomer because I don't like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 5's art style. My reaction to all of this, of course, was, well, sounds like a day as a YouTuber. I then went about my usual morning routine of bringing the electric heater downstairs to try and warm the kitchen, staring out at the snow as it piles up, burying me in this too expensive of a house that I moved into because I thought I could afford it, not realizing that my Patreon was going to take a massive dip as soon as I moved in on account of the fact that I wasn't uploading frequently enough, bringing me to the realization that I can't afford to not upload constantly. Literally, I can't afford it. I signed a 1-year lease here. It costs $2,300 a month to live here, on the far outskirts of Boston. Boston, which happens to be one of the most expensive cities to live in the United States, and also happens to be home to one Mike Toole, an older, influential anime writer who, upon seeing my JoJo reaction video where I'm screaming about being a drunk, insane person, he says, "I just assume all these YouTube celebrities are millionaires." Out of all the responses I got, I think that's the one that pissed me off the most. This is coming directly after I nearly lost my channel entirely due to false copyright claims. I, who makes very little money off of ad revenue and pretty much everything off of very generous fan donations from a group of people who I have to placate by constantly drip feeding content at all times, because doing otherwise does not work. And I don't mean this to slag off my patrons. I know a lot of you will stick around, a lot of you have faith in the things that I do, that I'm going to provide the type of content that you like. You won't just unsubscribe because there wasn't a new video in a couple weeks. But nonetheless, I did end up in the position I ended up in when I moved here. So I can only have so much faith. Meanwhile, I'm over here trying to explain to my audience that no, I didn't suddenly change my mind about the idea that objectivity doesn't exist and that everybody is allowed to like whatever they want, and just suddenly flip a switch and become someone who thinks that everyone's wrong who disagrees with me. I am being facetious, because I want to believe that after making countless videos where I insistently repeat myself that everything anyone says is just their opinion, that there is no way to say that something is objectively good, I have at that point earned the right to crack jokes such as that everyone who disagrees with me is wrong. Because I would think that people would appreciate that as a form of self-parody of the character that I've been performing on this platform for fucking 6 years. Meanwhile, I can't find any particular content style that actually works, that everybody will agree with is the best kind of thing I could be making. When I try to make the kind of content I'm actually passionate about, such as videos about music, or videos about games that I'm interested in talking about, it doesn't go anywhere. And I'm faced with the dilemma that if no one style of content I produce is going to get a massive amount of attention, or even a massive amount of praise from the people who already are paying attention, then the only resolution is to make as much of it as possible. Meanwhile, the first friend who I made as a YouTuber, who's been doing it just as long as I have and is now struggling to become an indie game dev, living in my house for free, simultaneously has a leg problem that's made him unable to walk and now has the flu, had to go to the hospital, is in crushing amounts of student debt and doesn't have any money. The rest of my friends are struggling to keep their careers off the ground. And our plan to have everybody move to Boston and create some kind of artistic cabal is standing on shaky ground as I fucking hate this place. I live in a century-old house with shit electrical wiring and no central heat, and it snows for half the fucking year. And I'm contractually obligated to be here until May at the very least. Paying my editor is taking such a huge chunk out of my salary that I'm telling him currently that he's going to have to seek other revenue streams because I won't be able to pay him his full living wage going forward into the future if I have so little expendable income. Meanwhile, this is on the backdrop of channels being shut down for literally no reason every single day. People getting banned from Patreon because they said a naughty word. And more importantly than any of that, just the crushing reality of how fucking stupid almost everybody is. Being besieged on all sides by people who feel the need to constantly shove their fucking political opinions in your face, and then to tell you how wrong you are because you didn't watch whatever video they watched that convinced them that they know what they're talking about. So how can you know what you're talking about? Slowly feeling yourself becoming more and more of an angry, bitter, resentful asshole who is not only incapable of making new friends, but doesn't even want to, because who the hell is worth it? And still managing to get to sleep every night feeling like you're one of the luckiest people in the world because you managed to find a wife who you actually care about and like enough that she can justify you continuing to live, even though you know that without her, you probably would have killed yourself a year ago. And in spite of all that rage and ire for humanity, you still find yourself bothering to try and help your emotionally unstable fans and friends because you want the few people who actually like you to feel good about themselves for at least a second. Meanwhile, half of everybody who knows your name thinks that you're a pedophile because you decided to take the most radical stance on free speech that you could possibly imagine. And you can't even fall in with any particular clique because there is none that actually represents your values enough for you to not butt heads with anybody in their community. The vision in your head for what your life was going to be when you moved to Massachusetts right after they legalized weed was that you were going to do nothing but smoke pot and watch anime all day and then take trains into the city to eat at crazy exotic restaurants. When in reality, weed took 4 months to actually be available for sale. Your wife ended up in the hospital and is afraid of even smoking it anymore. Now that it's finally legal, it's prohibitively expensive for somebody with the terrible expenditure history that you currently have, and it definitely isn't even worth it. Meanwhile, going into the city is a huge fucking pain in the ass, and you don't want to go outside for about 70% of the year because it looks like this. So day in and day out, you feel your back deteriorating as you sink further and further into an aging $30 couch you can't afford to replace while you watch every single anime that ever came out in an entire year and try to make videos about it every single goddamn day. Meanwhile, watching contemporaries start their careers much later than you and blow past you immediately with more formulated content that you can't stand to watch and wouldn't be able to bring yourself to duplicate. While half of your friends, who you consider to be even more talented and even better at making videos than you are giving up on the dream of being a YouTuber entirely because they just can't deal with the entire system anymore and were never even as successful as you were because you make more formulated content than they do. Meanwhile, plugging away at more literative writing in your spare time that you can't do anything to monetize because the entire industry of writing literatively has fallen apart. And if you don't make something as a YouTube video, then not enough people are going to see it for it to have any kind of impact. And not enough people care about creatively phrasing things over the way that they care about creatively framing things in a camera. As you balance all of these emotions and different content styles, you're also constantly thinking about how you can possibly open second revenue streams by making some kind of product that you could actually sell to people, except that because you are in fact a one-man team, you will never find the time to actually act on these ideas. The one time a so-called talent agency come MCN decides to work with you, they just take your money for a year and don't provide you any service until you have to struggle and fight to get out of your fucking contract. Meanwhile, startup businesses that seem interested in you turn out to be frauds that get driven off the platform. And because you make the decision to actually be honest with what goes on behind the scenes and let people know how you feel about the corporations that are trying to work with you, or about the people who are trying to work with you, inevitably you will burn all of those bridges. And they'll paint you as a guy who's just being an asshole. In fact, 50-something-year-old anime writers will accuse you of leading a hate mob because you said that you didn't like a cartoon. While about 50 YouTubers who live entirely on the ad revenue that they can generate from being controversial and insulting other YouTubers are making hit pieces about you, digging for every scrap of something they can say to paint you as a bad guy, because that narrative will literally line their pockets. And this is all while the art mediums that you care about because you grew up with them and they informed much of your mindset as a human being are either falling apart at the seams or moving in a direction you can't relate to. Yet the job market outside of what you do is also such a clusterfuck that you're not sure if there's any job that would actually be better than being a YouTuber. Higher and higher level jobs are being automated, and it's speculated that entrepreneurship is the only real way to guarantee safety in the future. The foothold of what people champion as norminess is dissolving underneath their feet. There is no going back. There is no return to a time before social media. There is no way to bring back the idea of the job that the Industrial Revolution brought about, because that revolution is over and we are already in the next. Yet your attempt to build a base of knowledge upon which to build so that you can continue and share your ideas is constantly being undercut by the short attention spans and lack of interest in going back into the past of the average audience member, necessitating you to explain yourself over and 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 over again. Your hair is rapidly graying at age 27, and you're finding it harder and harder to kick your addictions to cigarettes and soda that you used to be able to give up at random, and now you suddenly find absolutely necessary to make it through the day. On the backdrop of your naturally deteriorating health as you enter a new stage of life and start having things like stomach problems that you never had to worry about as a youngster. The internet creators who inspired and impressed you slowly either fall off of the platform or continue to make lower and lower effort content as a means of survival, and nothing new is arriving to replace them. You spend a month desperately searching through YouTube channels trying to find something, anything that can fill more of your time by giving you something new to subscribe to, while the rest of the world is seemingly content with an endless deluge of Netflix bullshit constantly shoving political agendas in your face. Being a YouTuber sure is great, just like living on planet Earth sure is great. I love it here. What a fun time. What a great life here on this earth.